Hi, this is Liz and Lisa.
And we're the authors of The Year We Turned 40.
And you're listening to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Nate Goss, one of Cook's librarians, and I'm here with Tom Maegdlin, co-owner of independent coffee shop Hansa Coffee right here in Libertyville. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Nate. Good to see you.
Today we debut a new feature in this episode that we're calling Locally Sourced. The idea is that we have local business owners come on the podcast and talk a little bit about a book that has had special significance in their lives. So Tom is here to help us kick off this feature. But Tom, before we jump right into your book pick, just got to say, love the coffee.
Thanks, man.
I'm here all the time. How's Hansa doing these days?
We just opened our second store in Lake Bluff. We continue to grow on the wholesale side of the business, which is the business we do between other coffee shops, bakeries, restaurants, and we just want to provide the best possible cup of coffee we can. Things have been going really well, and I really couldn't be happier.
Yeah, well, you can tell from the bustle in the mic here that this place is hopping right now.
Yeah, it's you don't have to build out $1 million store to make people comfortable.
All right, well said, Tom. So why don't we go ahead and jump in? So
sure.
What's the book that you want to share with our listeners today?
I've picked this book up 3 or 4 times throughout, from the time I was probably 19, 20 years old on. And the book is Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. I've always kind of found him to be a kindred spirit in a way.
Okay.
He's that was my wife's assessment. I was telling her about this interview, and she was like, "Well, what about Anthony Bourdain?" And I said, that's true." And she's like, "Well, the reason you like him is because you guys have similar personality traits." And one of the things is I appreciate about him in this writing style in his book is just his honesty. He's a wordsmith, but it's almost earthy. It's a lot like his cooking style, which is very stripped down, homey, and kind of almost like a French, just like a French ma and pa restaurant. But
sure.
The book is really, it's a lot of things. There's a scandalous element to it.
Yeah, actually, why don't you just real quick, what's like your 30-second description of the book itself? Kitchen Confidential, Anthony Bourdain. What is this book?
Kitchen Confidential is a distillation of anybody's 20s who worked in a kitchen or anybody who worked in the service industry. You will identify with the characters that he describes in this book, the people that he describes, the ownership, the co-workers, the idiosyncratic other chefs. And basically, if you work in the food industry at all, or even just enjoy food, you will know somebody in this book. Obviously, the person who's narrating, Bourdain, who's this Vassar educated guy. He probably should have been a writer, but he ended up in some dirty, hot, smelly kitchens in New York.
Sure.
And really found his passion there.
Yeah, and he's just such a cool guy. I do watch Parts Unknown, the show he has, and he's got opinions. Right. And he's not afraid to share them, but he also just seems like a guy you'd love to go hang out with.
Oh, absolutely. And if you know any people in the restaurant industry, they're all
all like that. Yeah.
Extremely honest, unwavering in what they believe in. And I will, actually, to make a Libertyville reference, if you've ever been to Milwaukee Trace and you've seen Lee Kubler and what him and his staff do over there, I like to say that I relate to Anthony Bourdain, but I'm not talented in that way, and I'm not as good as what I do as even like Lee Kubler. If you've been to Milwaukee Trace and Libertyville here, awesome. It just shows that passion. When you see cooks working on the line, you see just a lot of crazy running around and working and yelling at each other. But really the passion's there. They really want to feed you the best thing that they can feed you. Right?
Yeah, they care about what they're doing.
Absolutely.
That's almost a craftsmanship to what they're doing.
Oh,
yeah.
It's on a whole nother level.
When did you first read Kitchen Confidential?
Oh, God, it was in college. A friend of mine, and this is really when foodies were starting to become, in the cultural norm. And a friend of mine who was a foodie actually worked in a kitchen in New York. I saw this on his coffee table, and he actually had been through some similar things. Had been through drug rehab, and so for Bourdain was kind of a hero for him being a cook and going through what he went through. So he just gave it to me, and I read it, and something clicked because I worked in coffee all through my 20s. Actually, my first coffee shop job was when I was 15, It was something that a lot of people thought was just like my college job. But I kind of kept finding a way to get more entrenched in the industry and trying to turn this into something. And so, as I said, the first time I read it was in my early 20s, and then probably, when I left the coffee industry for the first time when I was like 25, 26, and reread it. And every time I read it, there's something new that I learned about it. There's something new that I can relate to. And, probably in 10 years, I'll dust this thing off and read it again, and it'll probably take on a whole new meaning for me. So.
It seems to have had sort of a lot of longevity, too, because this book was published in 2000.
Absolutely.
But you still hear people talk about it all the time.
Well, I think that because of the success of the TV show and people are getting to know him more. But it really is a different look at this guy, because you see him as Anthony Bourdain, not the show host. You see him as the chef.
Yeah.
You see him as the guy, he's talking about doing ordering. He's talking about, firing people. He's talking about, waking up next to his wife and typing out the menu at, 5 o'clock in the morning, which is all stuff chefs do. I mean, it's not a glamorous job, but it's like, look, this book it's a very honest tale of what it's like to work. And I worked as a prep cook for a short period of time, too, and I couldn't cut it.
I feel like there's a through line in the book for people who are thinking about becoming chefs. Do you really want to do this?
Well, there's a difference, and he articulates this very well. It's, do you like food or do you like working in a kitchen?
Yeah.
Because a lot of my friends who are foodies and who are actually really talented cooks could never cut it in a kitchen because the stress. But also an important point about this book that I need to bring up. It's not just about, one of the things that people talk about is, oh, well, I read this book and now I'll never order fish on Monday because X, Y, Z. Those are kind of tertiary things. What this book is about camaraderie between people. He talks about, you're going to work with guys that, have been in jail. You're going to work with guys that, guys and gals, really. And this is an important thing. He talks about some of the best chefs he ever knew were gals, and how important it is to make that distinction. A kitchen is made up of people from all walks of life.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a metaphor for the way any workplace, really.
Well, actually, speaking of that, I was going to ask you if reading Kitchen Confidential, did it have any impact in your decision to open a coffee shop, or did it teach you anything about that you've actually applied to your business here at Hansa?
Absolutely. One of the things I would say is that, I went into banking for a while, and I was really unhappy. And actually, the second time I read this book, it rekindled my love of serving a product. The other thing that it brought up is just the culture that we try to present here. For example, if you've ever been in a Hansa, the barista, that's their bar. They run the bar, they run the show. They're basically like the head chef. So that's something that I try to empower the employees to have, which comes from the culinary world.
Sure.
Now, I'm not comparing what we do to what great chefs do, but there is definitely that sense of ownership over what you're doing.
Do you have a favorite section in the book, or a quote, or just a favorite story in the book that you think about often?
Yeah, well, Adam, real last name unknown. This guy Adam in the book, he's this amazing bread cook. He could make the best breads. He was well known. He probably worked in 5 or 6 of the greatest restaurants in New York doing their breads. But the guy was, for lack of a better term, a transient kind of. We don't know if he was really a drug addict, alcoholic, but
had some issues.
He had some issues, but it was one of these things where it's just like, but you just ignored all that because this guy would come into work and just like. He describes it as penance. He said Adam had penance because of any bad thing that guy ever did. The purgatory time was cut down by every time that guy baked a loaf of bread.
Almost makes it redeeming in a way.
Absolutely. And to quote my business partner, Kevin Kane, when we were in the mortgage industry, he always says, like, when you do $2 million in sales a month, you go from being a problem employee to colorful. And I would say that this is a perfect example of somebody who's really colorful.
I haven't read all of Kitchen Confidential. I'm excited to get into it, though, because I realize if you do the audiobook, he actually reads it himself.
Yes, yeah.
Have you ever done the audiobook at all?
Yeah, to be totally honest with you, audiobooks are what I do a lot of the time just because I'm a business owner. I got my hands in everything. A lot of the time I do audiobooks.
Yeah.
And the thing I loved about Bourdain reading it was he inflected all the points. He told, he's telling the story as himself, and it's actually funnier,
Yeah, I bet, because he's just as much of an entertainer as he is, if you watch his shows and everything, as he is a good writer, a good chef, all that stuff.
Yeah, he's a guy you'd want to hang out with.
We're speaking about Bourdain now. Did you read that he recently had an interview with Bon Appetit just a few weeks ago? Did you catch that or not?
I didn't, but
okay.
But what was the?
I just wanted your response. because he kind of slammed coffee shops a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you read that, or did you notice that?
Okay. So a lot of coffee shops should be getting slammed.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, and the reason is because we're here to serve the customers, right? And a lot of specialty coffee, which is what we do, which is where we're sourcing the coffee from origin. We're spending a lot of time on the actual preparation of the drink and stuff. And it takes a little longer. There's no lie to that. But there's been a shift in the coffee industry, especially lately, with how popular things have gotten, to where they're just condescending. One of the important things I always want to bring up with the people that work with us is that we have nothing if it's not for the customer. Mm-hmm. But then again, it's such a fashionable industry to be in right now. And I've been doing this for 15 years. I've been in the specialty coffee industry that long. And so I've seen what's old become new again. And we're actually going through a boom right now. And I think we're teetering on the cusp of coffee getting less popular again.
Sure.
Which is actually not a bad thing.
It's trends. Trends come,
right.
Trends go. And if like Bourdain, if you just have an internal passion for that, it stays with you. There's longevity to that through the trends.
At the end of the day, we're making food or we're making drinks for people. And we want them to be awesome. But we're not special.
Well, I think even in the book, Bourdain mentions just having that realization that he's not the best chef in the world.
No.
And having to grapple with that he'll never be that.
No, and I tell these guys all the time, it's like, I'm going to make you a really awesome drink that you're going to remember. But man, there's people in California doing stuff that I'll never get to that level.
Yeah.
But does that mean that I shouldn't? I should just quit what I'm doing?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the way you got to look at it.
Do you think if anybody's thinking about getting into the restaurant business or service business, would you see this as almost required reading?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's that one book that it's kind of like the. Another book that I love is The Innovator's Dilemma, which is about disruptive technology.
Sure. Yeah.
I would say anybody going into tech or anybody going into business needs to read The Innovator's Dilemma for the very reason it's like, look, this is the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Like this is really the stuff that happens.
Coming from someone who's been there, who's gone through it.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always tell people is no amount of talent will ever replace hard work. And that's probably one of the things I take away most from this book.
Well, that might be a good place to end it, actually.
Thanks,
so,
man.
Tom, I want to thank you for talking with us today, and we want to make sure we invite all of our listeners to make their way down to Hansa here, if they haven't already, to see what good coffee can be.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else you want to add even about Hansa before we go?
No, I just want to say something about Libertyville. Libertyville is a, on the subject of food, it's a foodie destination.
It is.
Now.
It's so great.
You got DeVille's, you got Milwaukee Trace, obviously Firkin and Tavern, two of my favorites, and now Milwaukee Taco and 545. If I'm leaving anybody out, I'm sorry, but we really are lucky to have such a committed group of chefs here in town.
I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Okay, so if you want to check out Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, head over to the library's website, www.cooklib.org, to explore our catalog. Maybe even chance yourself upon some other coffee or Bourdain-related resources at the library. We also want to remind you about Shelf Life, the library's blog where this podcast is actually hosted, and invite you to read a few posts written by our librarians who are always up on the latest must-read material. That blog can be found over at shelflife.cooklib.org. If you have any further comments, shoot us an email. The address is webmaster@cooklib.org. And it would make us so happy if you share this podcast with your friends or leave us a kind rating on iTunes. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.